Greetings, brothers and sisters. It's the 26th of October and it's just after 10 in the evening here in South Africa. And I'm super excited to get back to you with another video. Today we're going to build on my previous video on the Ezekiel story, Ezekiel's 390 and 40-day count, where we discovered in our last video that there was an extra 6 days. And in fact, it might actually be an extra 7 days. And I'll get into that later in this video. Yeah, the story seems to be unfolding. I believe, as per my previous video, I believe that we needed to get to the end of the 390 days for the escape of the bride, and that seems to be the case. Although the start of where the count is does seem to be, in fact, the 390 days seems to have started on the 7th of October. In my previous video, for those of you who haven't watched it, I would highly recommend that you watch this video, which I put out 2 weeks ago, and it's called "What About the 6 Days" in Ezekiel's 390 and 40-day story. So you're going to have some difficulty following what I'm saying in this video if you haven't watched that video. So I'm really just going to build onto what I shared in that video there. Yeah, so that's what we're going to get into this video. I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible and just cover some of the adjustments that we need to make to our understanding from 2 weeks ago. Just some interesting things that I've discovered while I was busy preparing for this video. I decided to put a chart together to try and explain some of the things that I'm seeing, and how, in fact, the count that's given to us in the Ezekiel chapters, well, it's really from chapters 1 through to 8, with 2 dates given, and we're given a 7 days and a 390 days and a 40 days. And then we discovered there were these hidden 6, possibly 7 days. And I believe those numbers are actually fitting into the picture now even more clearly, now that we understand more clearly where the 390 starts. And I can show you where the 7 fits in. And then I'm going to discuss where I believe the 6 days fits in. And I did mention last week there was a possibility that fits between the 390 and the 40. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that, more of that in this video. I decided that to facilitate what I want to show you, I need to put a chart together. And so when I got onto my PC, I thought I was certain that I did something on this some time ago. Anyway, I did a search. I came across a chart that I actually prepared last year, and I published it last year, 26th October, so to the date, 26th October, and I shared it on in a comment on the forum. This was the chart that I actually put together. At the time when I put it together, it was all about proving. I just want to try and get this a little bit larger. It was all about proving that the Ezekiel story of the 390 and the 40 actually prove that there is from time to time that there is a 13-month year. So that was what this was all about, and I put this chart together in detail. So you will see in this chart here, what we've got here is the just a general year count. Okay, this was no specific year, but just a general year count with a 13 years. Sorry, with a 13th month in it, and I just proved in this to myself and anybody who was willing to have a look at it, that it was impossible to have this count of 390 and 40 in a 12-month year. It had to have been a 13-month year, otherwise the dates are impossible. The 2 dates that were given, the first date we given in chapter 1 was the 5th day of the 4th month, when Ezekiel he sees the Lord, he sees the vision of the throne, and then 7 days later, he's called. The Lord appears to him again, and it's at that point that he's appointed as a watchman, and etc. And I covered most of this in the previous video anyway, so I'm just really touching on. So in this count, this was now a year ago. Before I was even at that stage, I was still looking at the possibility of the 390 being more representative of a 1 year of the famine of the word, where the Lord would be tied up, spending a year with his bride after the wedding, based on Deuteronomy. Was it this one here? No, sorry. This was the way I shared the chart. That was that chart that I made. This was the chart that I shared last year, on this date, 26th October. But there was another. There's a recent discussion that we were having yesterday, and in the forum, and I just want to get to that. It's actually a great discussion piece. I'd recommend to get into this, go read through these some of these discussions that took place. I just want to find it here. So that would be this one here, a post that I put in, and yeah, there's been a fair amount of discussion in this, and it was in this that I came across. Let me just go into that. Yeah, in that thread during the discussion, you'll have to dig through the comments there, but there was something that very interesting that came up, and it was Chris that actually asked the question. He said, and he pointed out this thing that we have in Deuteronomy 24:5, which states that a man cannot go to war or be charged with any business for 1 year after his wedding, and he goes on to say, would this not apply to Jesus, as he will be taking a new wife? If this applies to him, then would he be able to come back for the 40 days? So I responded, and I said to him, look, this is an excellent question. This is something that had actually come to mind way back in 2021, and I referred to a post. This was a post going back to 21, where I was looking at that. And I'm not saying this was correct totally correct at that time, but I was looking at that time. There was the same issue, this Deuteronomy 24:5, where the husband is to remain uninvolved in business and war for the first year, and so at that stage, I was looking at the Ezekiel 39 story being possibly possibly being fulfilled in end times in reverse order, where we would have the 40 days of Ezekiel 40, and then followed by the 390, with the 390 being a year that the Lord is tied up. I made the connection of where Ezekiel is tied up and the Lord being tied up and unable to be directly involved in the first year, at least, of the Red Horse Rider, when the sword is sent out. So I was looking at that possibility largely because of this Deuteronomy 24:5. When I saw more recently how the Jews were counting the days from October 7, I thought to myself, hang on a second, there's something here. And this seems to be a direct connection to the 390 days, especially when we got to about the 348th day. At that point in time, I realized, now hang on a second, there's definitely something going on here. And so my thinking has changed, but we've still got this problem. My thinking has changed that we are in the 390-day count. That is the warning for the house of Israel. For those that are and the Gentiles that are grafted in, and it will be followed by the 40-day warning for the house of Judah, as per the Ezekiel story. And then we sit with the problem that we've got the 7-day wedding, which didn't seem to be provided for in that 390 and the 40, unless until we discovered the extra 6, possibly 7 days, and we're not told where to place those extra days, as per my previous video, which could well provide for that time slot required for the wedding. But we also got this other problem, as Chris pointed out, that there's this year. How does the Lord get married and then come and work for 40 days, and how do we deal with that year of doing no business and war after in his first year? So that is something that we also need to have a look at. There's something that I came across in the Apocrypha book called the first book of Adam and Eve. And if you go and read in that story, when Adam and Eve got married, there was they entered into a marriage covenant, and then they were required to pray for 40 days, and after the 40 days of fasting and prayer, they were then allowed to consummate the marriage, which is something that's been sitting in the back of my mind for some time, that we could have a situation or a similar situation now in these end times, where there's a 40-day gap between the actual covenant, the marriage covenant, and then the ultimate consummation and that 1 year break. And we also know from the scriptures that there's a time of the famine of the word, besides the famine of food and water. Ezekiel alludes to this as well in his enactment, in his 390 and his 40-day enactment. He alludes to the scarcity of food and water. But we also know from the word there's the famine of the word, which kind of implies that perhaps the Lord, at least for the first year of the tribulation, is not going to be as directly involved, and will in fact spend that year, in terms of the law, in terms of Deuteronomy 24:5, with his bride, where his servants are the only spirit-filled agents on the world, in the world, to help them through that year. So just something to think about. That's a possibility, that we've got the 7-day covenant followed by the 40-day warning, and then followed by then the actual consummation of if you can call it that, of the marriage, and that 1 year break, where the bridegroom spends with the year with his bride, as per the pattern that's given to us in the book of Adam and Eve. Anyway, so I digress a little bit. I just want to get back to this chart that I put together, so, where we were looking at the Ezekiel's 390 and the 40-day, and how it has to fit into a 13-month year. And in this one, I started the count, the 7 days that we were given, being the first day, being the first day of the 4th month, when he first sees the vision of the throne, followed immediately by the 390 days on his left side, and followed immediately by the 40 days on his right side. And then you can see in this chart, so a year ago I saw the 6 days. There was this 2 days left in the 5th month, and then there's the 4 days in the 6th month, to bring us to the 5th day of the 6th month, when Ezekiel's now sitting with a group of elders in his home, and he's taken in the spirit into Jerusalem, and he's shown the state of Jerusalem. The Lord shows him the state of Jerusalem on that day, and at that time, you can see that the 6 days were there. I just didn't know what to do with them. They just sat there, and I never made the connection. So as I say in my last video, I've got these 6 days here, but they could just as well have been a break between the 390 and the 40, such that the 40 ends either the day before the 5th of the 6th month here, or on the 5th of the 6th month. So you can see in this count It's a total of 433 days. Okay, it's the 7, the 390, the 40, so it's 437 plus the 6, that's 433. But you'll see that I'm taking only 4 days of the 6 month and not so the 5th day is not included in the count. If we are supposed to include the 5th day in the count, then it would in fact be 444 days, which gives us 7 days unaccounted for. So if the 40th day actually is the 5th day of the 6th month, then there would be 7 days between the 390 and the 70, not just 6. So it's just a difference. It's a matter of whether the total from whether we are to count inclusive of the 5th day of the 4th month and the 5th day of the 6th month. If they are included, then it's 444 days, of which 7, 39, and 40 are accounted for, and 7 are unaccounted for. So anyway, I just thought that interesting. And this was made, and I can see in the when I created it on the 26th of October last year, and posted it on that day. And it's just ironic when I searched for it and it came up today again. It's a year to the date that I was looking at this. Anyway, so getting back to, so I made another chart to try and explain to you what I've been seeing. Let's just go to that. So in this chart, I'm just going to, let me zoom out a little bit, just so that to orientate you as the viewer. So we've got the Gregorian calendar months 2023 from January to December, to 2024 from January to December, and then 2025 from January to December. Okay, just to give us a baseline to compare with, to relate to. And then we've got this peach colored line would be the Jews calendar, the 23-24 year, followed by the 24-25 year. We are currently in the 24-25 year. Okay, we're here in 24. We're here in this area, right in that area there. Then the blue is also a biblical calendar, but this is the Lord's calendar, where it's 2 months off. Okay, 2 months out of sync, or there's we believe that the Jews' calendar is 2 months too early, that the Lord's calendar actually begins when the sun is in Taurus. And I'm not going to get into an explanation for this 2 months in this video. If you for a more detailed explanation, I would recommend that you go and watch this video here, finding the true 5th month. In that video, I explain in a fair amount of detail how the equinox has shifted, which is the sun, moon, and stars follow the ecliptic line, and the ecliptic line is actually rotating around an axis, so it's shifting by about a month every 2,000 years or so. So we've got this situation where the sun and the moon are still moving at the same speed, but the line on which they follow is actually moving, and so that causes the seasons to move. And I explained that in a fair amount of detail using stellarium in this video. So if you want to understand that 2 months difference between what we call the Jews calendar and the Lord's calendar, this is the video to go through, to have a look at. Okay, so I'm going to just zoom in here a bit. So now that we've undergot some degree of orientation, let me just out a little bit. So what I've done is in each of the years, I've just plotted where the feasts are. So this is the 13, there's 13 months in this particular year. We know that in the Jews calendar, they observed a 13th month last year. So which ended in around the 8th and 9th April, and they started the new year which in this year will be a 12-month year. Then I've plotted where the feasts are. We've got Passover and Feast of Weeks. Passover, unleavened bread, and Feast of Weeks here in the first month. We've got Feast of Weeks count there, Pentecost, Feast of New Wine or Trumpets on the first day of the 7th month, Atonement, and then the Feast of Tabernacles. And then in the following year, the whole pattern repeats. So Passover, unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets, Atonement, and Tabernacles. Now, in the Lord's calendar, which is 2 months off, we would have exactly the same feasts, but they would be in each case 2 months off. And in the last video, you will recall that I noticed that there's a correlation between the Day of Atonement on the Jews' calendar lines up exactly with Pentecost on the Lord's calendar. It was in that video that I thought that possibly the Lord is counting the 390 days from Atonement, which would have meant that the end of the 390 days would have been around the 18th of October. And I was looking at possibly the bride being taken at the end of the 390 days, around about the 19th or the 20th of October. And that's come and gone now, so we're compelled to review that thinking. So it was during this discussion let me just see if I can. During this discussion here that I pointed out to this one here, this post that I put out on the 24th of October, and there's been a fair amount of discussion there. It was during that discussion that I think it was Brad made a comment, and that got me thinking. And he's commenting somewhere here in one of these things. Anyway, he commented that that he noticed that there were basically that there were 443 days from, if you take from October 7, 2023, and you add the 443 days, he came to a certain date in December. He came to the 23rd of December. But I think, just that comment got me thinking, and I knew that that was in the region of the end of Tabernacles. The 22nd of December this year will be the 8th day of Tabernacles on the Lord's calendar. And he had it down as 23rd, but then I realized that he had not included the 7th of October in the count. It's day one in his count was 8th October. But if you actually start with day 1 on 7 October, then day 443 is actually the 8th day of Tabernacles on the Lord's calendar. And that got me thinking, hang on a second, wait a minute, we've got something going here. So what I took was, then if that's the case, then there would be the 7th of October 2023 was the 8th day of Tabernacles in 2023 on the Jews calendar, and we've got a connection between two 8th days. We've got an 8th day from on the Jews calendar from last year being exactly 443 days to the 8th day on the Lord's calendar this year. And so if there's a connection between the two 8th days, there's also a connection of 443 days between the start of Tabernacles on the Jews calendar and the start of Tabernacles on the Lord's calendar. And if you've got to remember, that's 443 days includes the 7-day count. So it's not just the 390 and the 40, because that's 430 days. In this number of 443, there's 7 days plus this other 6 days. And if this is in fact 444, then it could actually be 7 days here. It just depends whether we're supposed to include that 5th day of the 6th month or not. So I'm going to leave it as a 6/7 day here. So if we actually supposed to start this whole count actually started in Ezekiel, we've got the 7 days. We've got the After he sees the vision of the throne, there's the 7 day we're given in the story before he's given the instructions on the 390 and the 40-day enactment. And we've got, if we start this whole process on the beginning of Tabernacles, well, that's a 7 day. Tabernacles is 7 days, which then puts the beginning of the 390 days on the after Tabernacles, on the 8th day of the day after Tabernacles, the 8th day. So day 1 of the 390 would be the 8th day following the 7 days, which is exactly the 7th of October on the Jews' calendar last year, which is where we were looking at the possibility of the start of the 390-day count. And I said, okay, that fits out. And that takes us through the last day of the 390-day count would be the 30th of October in that instance. So if we, from 7 October plus 390 days, including both of those days, so including the 7th day of October as the first day of the 390, and the last day of the 390 is the 30th of October. So the end of the warning, the end of the count would be 30th of October, and 31 would be the first day after that warning. So I'm at this point, I'm now believing that with this adjustment, we're now looking at the possibility of the escape of the bride. Instead of being on the 19th of October, we're looking at it being 12 days later, on the 31st of October this year. With so that at the end of the 390 days, which is the warning to the house of Israel. And that seems to be the most logical place to place the escape at this point in time. We all know the connection of the 31st of October with what the enemy has done. And I'm not in no way saying that I think what has happened here, our enemy has figured this out some time ago, and he's actually made sure that that day can be considered as probably one of the most evil days in the calendar year. And I think he's made sure of that. He's marked a few other days as well, and I've come to the conclusion that our enemy doesn't actually know the exact day. He's figured out a few possibilities, and he's covered his bets on a number of possibilities. Maybe he knows exactly, but I think he's just guessing. And I think his highest guess was this 31st of October, based on exactly what I'm showing you now. He's figured out this some time ago, and he's marked that day. I do believe he's also marked. If you count from the 31st of October, and if you count off the 6 days, you get to the 5th of November. And that too is also been marked, a marked day. You all know that's Guy Fawkes. That's, remember the 5th of November. That's the day that Guy Fawkes wanted to blow up the British Parliament, if I recall correctly. That was the story. But basically, it's a marked day. It's an evil day. So we've got this whole period. For some of the reason our enemy marked that day. That would be the end of the 6 and possibly the start of the 40 days. If, however, this is this 6 day count is actually a 7 day count, well then the start of the 40 days may actually be on the 7th of November. And our enemy has made sure that he's accounted for that possibility as well. And we've got a 7/11 situation here, 7 November, 7/11. And you'll remember how 7/11 has been connected to 9/11 in the statement that Trump made some years ago. So we've got another possible 7/11, 9/11 event, the beginning of the 40 days. And if the 6 is in fact 7 days as opposed to 6 days, if it's supposed to be 444 days, including the 5th day of the 6th month, then 7 days, and that would take us to the beginning of the 40 days on the 7th of November, and that would then end on the 16th/17th of December, if you take 40 days, which is the first and second day. It's actually the second, and the 15th of December is the first day of Tabernacles on the Lord, Lord's calendar. So we're looking at the second or the third day of Tabernacles for the end of the 40 days. Just interesting that 17th of December would also be a 17/7. So let me go and explain all of this on the calendar. So at this stage we're looking at the end of the 390 days, the last day of the 390 day count being the 30th of October. So the first day after the 390 day count would be the 29th day of the 5th month, and being the 31st of October, and it is a Sabbath day. So it is dark moon. So if we count off the 6 days, if we include that day as the first of the 6 day count, the 31st of October, so that we 2 days, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 day. The 6th day is the 5th of November, with the 40 days starting on the 5th day of the 6th month, which is the 6th of November. Now, interesting is that 5th day of the 6th month corresponds with the end of the Ezekiel story. You'll recall that his end of the enactment, and the day that he's taken up in the spirit to show the evil of that's occurring in Jerusalem, was on the 5th day of the 6th month. And if it's a 6 day count, then the 40 days starts on the 5th day of the 6th month on the Lord's calendar, on the Taurus calendar, on the calendar where it starts, where the year starts when the sun is in Taurus, the 2 month, the one that starts. So this would be the 5th day of the 8th month on the Jews calendar, but it's the 5th month of the 6th month on the Lord's calendar. And we see this interesting correspondence between those 2 dates, the beginning of the 40 days. If, however, there is a 7 day count between the taking of the bride, and that's day 1 of 7 days, so that'll be 2 plus another 5, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the 40 days actually starts on the 6th of the 6th month, and that would be on that day, that 7 November, that's 7/11. So those are 2 possibilities, 40 days starting there or there, and either of those 2 days are very interesting. And so it actually might be right in between those 2, from the change over from that day from the 6th to the 7th, possibly the 7th 7/11 in Jerusalem, and 6/11 in the US for the beginning of the 40 days, which would account for 6/7 days between the taking of the bride and the beginning of the 40 days. Then if we count off the 40 days, that brings us to the 40 days would end, depending on whether it's the 6th or the 7th, it would be the 16th or the 17th of December would be the end of the 40 days. And we see that's the 2nd or the 3rd day of Tabernacles on the Lord's calendar, which would correspond to the 16th of the 7th, or the 17th of the 7th day would be the end of the 40 days and the beginning of tribulation. So it's possible that 7/17 actually may well be the true beginning of tribulation in the midst of Tabernacles on the Lord's calendar. That, of course, would be 17th day of the 9th month on the Jews calendar. You've got to add 2 months to the 7. Okay, 7th day of the 9th on the Jews calendar. So yeah, that's basically. So that's we've looked at that now from a perspective on the actual calendar. So some interesting connections, I do believe. I hope that setting it out in this way, it makes it a little bit more understandable in terms of the count. I think the important thing at the moment is we're looking at 31 October for the taking of the bride, and then a wait of about 6 or 7 days. And this could be the situation where the wedding covenant is entered into. Then we've got the 40 days, which is equivalent to the prayer and fasting that Adam and Eve underwent after the covenant, and then the consummation after the 40 days, and possibly the famine of the word, and the time when the Lord spends with his bride for a year. Yeah, something along those lines. So as I say, this is a developing story. We'll see things we've seen how now, just earlier, just a few hours ago, just under about 22 hours ago. So probably actually a little bit less, probably about 20 hours ago, that Israel attacked Iran, and they've now said that they've completed their retaliation. And now we sit and wait for the possible retaliation of Iran, and we'll see what happens there. I believe fairly strongly that in terms of Daniel's 70 weeks, when understood in terms of the end times, that we must have a partial destruction of Jerusalem, so that the decree to rebuild and restore can be issued, which will be the trigger for the 7, 6, and 2 years, which is the 15 years in Daniel. That corresponds to our 14 years, but Daniel had an extra year. He takes it beyond, he takes it to the end of the anointing of the Holy One. To understand, if you want to have a look at my explanation of what I believe to be the correct understanding of Daniel's 70 weeks for the end times, then you need to have a look at these Daniel's 70 weeks. Let me just see it here. These two videos over here, Daniel's 70 weeks, the correct interpretation, part 1. This is looking at it in terms of the wars, how it actually transpired to the coming and the baptism of Jesus Christ, of the Messiah. And then, of course, the same prophecy can be understood in terms of end times, which is 70 years, understanding. Then that's explained in this part 2. So if you want to understand Daniel's, what I believe to be the only and the true, what I believe to be the correct interpretation, what I believe to be the correct interpretation of Daniel's 70 weeks in terms of the was and the is and is to come, then I would recommend you have a look at those 2 videos, and you'll understand what I mean by the trigger, where Jerusalem has to be partially destroyed, partially something has to happen to Jerusalem, the city itself, so that the decree can be issued during these 40 days. During the time of the 40 days, there will be a decree that will be issued to restore and build, and that will be the trigger for the tribulation, just like it was the trigger for the beginning of the 70 weeks, 70 weeks of years, which is 490 years. The decree to restore and build was the trigger for the beginning of the 490 years. It will also be the trigger for the 14 stroke 15 years, which is the 7, 6, and 2, described in Daniel's prophecy. Yeah, so I think with that, we watch and wait, and it's pretty exciting times. I think this is probably been, well, I know for a fact this has been the most exciting 7 years from a biblical perspective, from a spiritual perspective in my entire life. And I think we're about to see the fulfillment of a lot of things that we've come to understand, and looking forward to seeing you guys and getting on. This may well be my last video. I don't know what once this great and I think what the Bible really describes as the great and terrible day of the Lord. When this comes, what exactly we're going to be doing the day thereafter, that remains to be seen. I don't know if we'll be making any more of these types of videos. We'll see. So this may well be my last video. Okay, with that, I'm going to sign out. May God bless you and keep you, and see you soon.